Hi and welcome everyone to our 85th episode of The Little Inside. Just as last week, I'm kind of still Tobi, and that's okay. And this week, I'm going to explore a little bit
suffering,
Dispassion, and happiness. Yay!
Let's get started right after your intro.
what is suffering? I'm talking a lot about suffering. There's a whole lot of suffering going on in the world. But what actually is suffering? So when I talk about suffering, what I mean here is three things basically. One is just your average, basic, everyday misery. Waking up with a headache, not getting what you want, being confronted with what you don't want to be confronted with, like all these kind of things, all the unpleasant things that exist in our life on a day-to-day basis. Now, this starts from subtle stuff like your posture, for example, when you're sitting and it's kind of unsatisfying, right? Your posture constantly becomes painful, so you have to adjust again, you have to kind of stretch out a little bit, changing your posture all the time, and really, it doesn't end the problem. It just always leads to the next kind of problem, doesn't it? So this is the basic nature of life, that we have to experience unpleasantness. So that's the first thing that when I think about suffering, that's what comes to mind. It's the very fact that we have to experience unpleasantness no matter what. The second thing that comes to mind when I think about suffering is the fact that no matter what kind of happiness I experience, it doesn't last. So any kind of happiness, whatever, whether it's small things like being hungry and getting to eat something, or being single and then finding your next girlfriend or boyfriend, like a little bit of distraction here and there, looking forward to get home from work, actually getting home from work, having someone tell you I love you, all these kind of little things, or big things like the promotion at your job, or then the marriage, or something like that, or winning the lottery. There's all these kind of happiness that we experience, whether they can be emotional types of happiness, they can be connected to the environment, changes in the environment. This kind of happiness never lasts, though. So this is the second thing that comes to mind when I think about suffering is, damn, why can't the good stuff last? Why doesn't it just stay? Why can't I arrange my life just in the perfect way and then it stays nice? But instead it doesn't stay nice. I can arrange it as much as I want to, and all I ever get out of it is just the next problem. Like with my posture. I can change my posture when it's painful. Like we all change our life when it becomes painful. Then we change our life. We turn it around. We change our circumstances. We change the way we think. We change the way we feel. But it never lasts. It's not sustainable. Okay, so that's the second point. The third point is, in fact, this very basic state of unsatisfactoriness. That's very deep down inside. It takes a good while to actually become more aware of this or more sensitive to this. It's this basic drive that we continuously have that doesn't let us rest. The mind is constantly agitated. It constantly wants something or doesn't want something. So it's really always busy, trying to get here, trying to get rid of that, trying to arrange this, trying to arrange that. So that very basic root, that dissatisfaction that is at the base of every being, that would be another point that comes to mind when I think about suffering. The Buddha uses the word dukkha. Dukkha means something like, that's what is hard to bear. Okay? So that's what I think when I think about suffering. All that is suffering for me. Suffering doesn't just mean the big, huge problems in the world, like war and famine and inequality and all that. That is suffering for sure, yes, but not only that, it's also that little itch. It's the fact that as soon as you want to go to sleep, there's the mosquito in your room. And you have nightmares, even if you don't want to have them. You get stressed, even if you don't want to get stressed. You get unhealthy, even if you don't want to get unhealthy. And so it keeps us constantly on our toes. It never gives us any moment of rest. Whether it's small suffering or big suffering, we can't rest. It doesn't allow us to rest. As I said in the intro, the second thing that I'm going to discuss is dispassion. So what's dispassion? Dispassion is what arises inside of you as you notice two things. One, you notice the unsatisfying nature of this material world, and of course also of your emotional states and your mental states. So you recognize deeply by continuous observation, you're looking at this, you're looking at these things. I'm not asking you to actually believe that the world is an unsatisfying place. That's nonsense. If you would just have to kind of accept it, all right, so the world is an unpleasant place or it's an unsatisfying place, that's nonsense. This is nothing to believe. It's something to observe in a very scientific way. Observing your mental states, observing your physical states, and observing the states of your surrounding world, even through history. Feel free to contemplate a little bit, looking at how things unfolded in history. And you will find that no matter what we did, no matter where we were, no matter whatever happened in this world, it kind of seems to keep spinning around and around and around. So war becomes peace, peace becomes war, war becomes peace, peace becomes war. Then a country is very powerful for a few, maybe 100 years, then it loses its power all of a sudden, then it's defeated in war, then it expands, then it contracts, etc. So the entire world, our whole human history really shows just this unsteady nature of life. When you deeply contemplate that this unsteady nature, this instability is not only outside ourselves but also inside ourselves, then what happens is you develop dispassion. That simply means that you're not feeling anymore that I can find happiness elsewhere. I can find happiness tomorrow. All I need to do is get there, and then happiness is magically waiting for me there. As soon as I get the promotion, then I'll be happy. As soon as I get the marriage, then I'll be happy. These kind of ideas will stop. That's dispassion. You kind of feel like, no, once I'm married, I'll be married. Once I get the promotion, I'll get the promotion. But happiness, that one happens elsewhere. And that's the second kind of point that comes to mind when thinking of dispassion. The first one is you lose interest in the idea that happiness is somewhere else out there. And at the same time, you start to recognize that happiness is right here, right now, in a state that doesn't stick to stuff. So if your mental state is liberated from the stuff of this world, emotions, thoughts, physical states, circumstances in your surrounding, if your mind can be liberated from that, if it detaches from that, there is a very genuine, very reliable sort of happiness to be found inside of yourself. The more you see that, so these two things, you see that there is true happiness is inside. If I want to really simplify that now, I should say it like that. True happiness is inside. And at the same time, you also recognize it isn't elsewhere. It isn't outside. That is the quality of dispassion. You truly recognize this from your own experience, not because you're believing in a text or because the Buddha said so or whatever, but because you see it for yourself again and again, here and now, because you dare to look at yourself quietly, day after day. So that will naturally arise when you're really looking at yourself, when you're really observing how you work, how your mind works, how your body works, etc. Right? And that leads us to the third point. The third point that I wanted to discuss in this video is happiness. So it's not just suffering, misery, and then dispassion. By the way, dispassion doesn't mean that you are unhappy and bored about the world. It doesn't mean that. Dispassion simply means you lose interest in the idea that stuff and things and events can truly make you happy in a lasting way. Then you prioritize happiness. And where can you find it? You can find it right in your center. When I say center, I'd like you to visualize a hurricane. You have this big storm. A hurricane has an eye, and it is very well known that this eye is completely quiet. The eye of the storm is, there is not a single wind in there. It's completely still. And yet around it there's this massive storm. Okay? Think of your center a little bit like that. It's kind of a nice image to kind of give you a sense of what it means when I talk about your center. Your center is unshakably quiet and peaceful and still. It's just that we never look there because, as I mentioned in the last week's video, that's where we're looking from. The center of yourself is the very awareness that is aware of this world. And of course, that awareness is mostly lost in the happenings of the world, in the walls of the storm around you. Okay? So when you have dispassion, it means you lose the interest in the idea that the walls of the storm somehow are going to fulfill you someday. And then you fall back into your center. You actually start to discover your center because you have no other way out. So that's the process that happens in spiritual practice. This is not at all depressing. This is not at all encouraging you to believe now, oh God, now everything is bad and now I have to feel bad about my happiness and I can't enjoy a good glass of wine anymore. I can't enjoy the movies anymore. I can't meet with friends because anyways, everything is unsatisfying. Some people think like that. It's actually quite common, and this would be kind of the first question that many of you will have. Yeah, but then does it mean, because everything is in that unstable nature, does it mean I can't enjoy anything anymore? No, it doesn't mean that. Well, enjoy. You go and you enjoy yourself. But when it comes to true, lasting, reliable happiness, a true refuge, then you can only find that in your center. And your center is where you're looking from. So you need to learn to look back at where you're looking from. Okay? That's where true happiness can be found. That's where reliable happiness can be found. There is other types of happiness in the world, and they are great. The happiness that arises from kindness, the happiness that arises from service, from selfless service, from compassion, from being connected to happy people, from doing things that are good, that are uplifting, that are inspiring. All that creates tremendous amount of happiness. And that is definitely true. And I'm encouraging you to develop these things, definitely. But again, here the point of this video is to say that there is a deeper layer, that there is something that is lasting, that is always reliable. And that is right within your center. This is not a condition that you can create. It's not something that you can somehow fabricate and put together, and then you have your little thing that you put together, and that will guarantee you a lasting happiness. It is not like that. So the spiritual path will go deeper into 3 aspects of happiness. We'll cover that in one of the upcoming videos, definitely a bit more in detail. This is all that comes to mind for this week. We're going to talk a little bit more about the various types of happiness in some of the upcoming next videos. For now, this is kind of all that comes to mind. I hope it was useful and beneficial in some ways and inspired you to go a little bit deeper, to look beyond the surface, maybe to look back at your own center. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to write them down right in the comment section below. I'm always happy to read your guys' comments. And I'm wishing all of you a wonderful next week. Looking forward to see you all again next Wednesday. For now, I say bye-bye.